They chuckled at him, humiliated him, pushed him away, but they didn't know who would wear it. It was a long and quiet ride on a bus to Lincoln Heights, Missouri. Dorian leaned against the window and observed how he switched from a busy road with scenery to a suburban area where all his homes looked like copies of the last home. Although he wasn't his first new child, this movement felt different. His mother accepted a better job, and his uncle told him he should see it as a fresh start. But when they looked like that in a city like this, a fresh start was not there. He felt it the moment he stepped into the Richmond Highs campus. A break in conversation as some of the students looked at him. He looked at him, and then he passed as he looked away, as if they weren't staring at him. The teacher was almost overly polite, and a bit too tight smile was a little too tight, and their voices became a little more careful. Dorian didn't respond. He was here before. The first period passed without any problems. He responded in his place when he was called and focused on his work. However, for lunch, the feeling of observation settled down like itching beneath his skin. In his tablet hand, he searched for the cafeteria for a place to sit. Most tables are already full and are groups that were included in conversations that did not contain them. Several students exchanged their appearances and whispered. He then discovered an empty seat to scroll through his phone and take care of him. It wasn't ideal, but I would do it. Dorian had little set up the tray when the sound cut open. "Have you lost it?" "Eee." He turned. A simple grin. Too many confident blond man leaned against his chair. Several others watched at his table for entertainment. Dorian let out a slow breath. "I didn't know I needed a card." The man laughed and shook his head. "Only secured. There are not many new faces here." Dorian grabbed a hesitant response to his voice, an implicit part of the sentence. He came across the man's strictness, his expression. "I think it's an exception." A smirk spread, but there was joy, interest, maybe something else. "Welcome to Ridgemont, Manitoba." Dorian said nothing, just sat down and picked up the fork. The news was clear. This was just the beginning. But what began as some looks and whispers turns into something much worse. At first it was just a small thing. There were a few side comments in the hallway, whispering loud enough to hear. "I didn't know how long you had left a boy like him here." Dorian ignored it. He was not here to maintain her ignorance. But Blythe wasn't the one who kept things unnoticed. Bryce Tanner had the confidence that came from the knowledge that no one checked him. His father had half of the car dealerships in the city, and his crew followed him as if he were a kind of royal quarters. And for some reason, Bryce had decided that Ridgemont's Dorian was the problem. The first actual test was done on a Dorian rocker. He traded his books when a sharp bump struck him in front of him. His shoulder hit the metal, and the noise echoed through the corridor. He said his voice was all wrong and innocent. "I didn't see you there." Dorian didn't respond. He grabbed the notebook and closed the locker, slowly controlling his movements. If he doesn't give them anything, they'll get bored. Blythe laughed. "You're quiet, right? This is cool. Really cool." Dorian turned around and looked at him, not making him angry, not worried. Blythe's glimpse with a slight laugh. Then his friend Nick, or maybe Kyle. They all mixed together and Blythe grinned again. "Find yourself later, new type." Dorian looked at her, and the noise in the hallway returned. "That was my first time. It was my second time in the cafeteria." Dorian headed for the dash pose as his leg was pushing. That wasn't subtle. That shouldn't be the case. His body was soaked, but he caught himself before he fell. "Smile." Blythe raised his hand. "Relax, man." "I was kidding." Dorian said nothing. He didn't see him. He continued, stepping on Blythe. "I laugh more." Someone tweeted it too easily. The Dorians collided with his pines. His uncle's voice echoed again in his head. "The lion does not shrink when the hyena barks." He exhaled, let go. But that wasn't enough for her. because the third time, Blythe confirmed that it wasn't just a joke, and that changed when things changed. After school, Dorian was ready in the library. Most students are already gone, and the parking lot is half empty. He was not in a hurry. His mother hadn't been home from work for a few hours and never made time to take his time. He heard a voice that was too familiar to him as he went outside. Hey, the new type. Dorian had little time to react to his back. He went forward and caught himself before coming to the sidewalk. Smile. He slowly turned. Blythe stood there, pinned down between Nick, Kyle, and several other types whose names have no role. Blythe was still holding his drink cup, and the last drops dripped from his fingers. Damn, my bad, Blythe said. He didn't even try to apologize. I have never met you. Dorian looked down. His hoodie was sprayed with soda, ice cubes scattered across his legs. Silence continued between them. Other students remaining on the property stopped looking at them. Dorian inhaled his nose and supported him. Blythe smiled. Come on, man, say something. Dorian didn't. He just started to pass by him. That was when Blythe pushed him. There was no playfulness. It wasn't just a joke. It was powerful. It should be provoked. Dorian stumbled through the steps. His breath was calm. His fingers moved his side. Blythe laughed. What? Are you afraid? Nick performed with a smile. No, man. It's just soft. Dorian listened to it for the rest of his life. Don't give it what you want. But Blythe didn't laugh a bit at this point. He's not just playing. He wanted a response. He wanted to prove something. Dorian took a last deep breath before lowering his backpack. Blythe raised his eyebrows. Yeah, you didn't answer anything now. Dorian moved. A step in the crotch is fast and beautiful. A feinting left enough to respond to Blythe, and a sharp right hook directly into his rib. I hated the sound. Blythe's breath shot with a choking breath as his body collapsed. But Dorian wasn't enough. Perfect shape for pitch and uppercut. Blythe's head snatched, and he spent his legs before he thought of staying on his own. He met the sidewalk vigorously. Please be silent. Nick and the others stared with open mouths. Dorian retreated and stabilized his hoodie and checked. Blythe groaned and tumbled to his side. Dorian finally spoke. Did you do that? Blythe didn't answer. He just coughed. Dorian saw the others. Someone else? No one moved. Dorian grabbed his backpack and put him over his shoulder. He left without another word. But what happened in this car park wasn't over. That was just the beginning. The next morning, it knew the whole school. Dorian didn't have to check her phone. The way people saw him said everything. The eyes were no longer mere curiosity. They were different. Some were impressed. Some were nervous. The couple saw him as if they were the first time they were looking at him. Blythe was not in school, so this part didn't surprise him. Nothing crashed overnight before halfway through the parking lot that scored such a goal. Nick and Kyle? They kept their distance. Dorian entered the class as if nothing had happened, sat down and pulled out the notebook business as usual. But that didn't mean people were talking. As he moved through the cafeteria, the conversation settled as he came. People whispered. The couple suddenly nodded, as if they had respect for him. The freshman who hadn't spoken to him didn't pretend he was a kind of legend. And there were other ones too. Damn, the new guy gave a different voice than I tweeted when he came. He wasn't a hero here. He wasn't looking for verification. As he sat down, he heard something else. It's just a violent racket. The words were soft, but not soft enough. Dorian turned his head slightly. Some girls at the nearby table were brunettes, one of them with expensive jewels, and the expression on her face as she saw something bad when she realized she had heard her. His stomach collided. That was the problem with such a moment. No matter how justified they are, no matter how correct the situation feels, someone has always found a way to twist it. But he didn't regret it. Blythe went after the battle. Dorian confirmed that he got it. Nevertheless, all the weight was on him. He trained for years, checked for years, and left for years. That was not a weakness. That was strength. Why did people feel that they had already decided who he was? But Dorian wanted to know how true power not only hits a blow, but its true strength. It was about what came next. The rest of the week passed blurry. Blythe hadn't appeared yet. His friends no longer bothered Dorian. My eyes faded a little. The whispers became quiet. But something was still in the air. Dorian could feel that. One afternoon, when he left the gym, Coach Harrison called him. Do you want to divide?" Dorian hesitated. He wasn't in the mood for a lecture, but something in the tone of the coach made him stop. They went outside and stood near the route where the soccer team had finished training, the coach said. They discovered that they had a reason. Dorian nodded. He didn't want to apologize. The trainer studied him. "I've been boxing since my kids." The coach pushed the low pipe. "Yes, so many things were clear. You are fine. But let me know something. Has this fight changed a bit?" Dorian looked at him and didn't know where it went. The trainer crossed his arms. "Do you think Blythe learned something? Think about it." The rest of them spit out Dorian and ran their hands over his head. He knew the answer. Blythe should not have looked back at the man. And what about other people? Some people respect him now, some feared him. And no matter what he is doing, some people always look at him as they wanted. The coach nodded as if he could see how he ran down Dorian's head. "The problem is that people like Blythe really won't lose. It's not a way to keep it. He's coming back." He guides his mouth and the cycle begins again. "But what about you? You're not. You are in control." Dorian frowned. "What do you say?" The trainer dragged his head onto the field. "I told my boxing coach that he should send me a few kids to wrestling. Have you ever thought about using all of these skills?" Dorian flashed. "Wrestling?" Coach grinned. "I know you can deal with yourself. This is obvious. But there's a difference between winning the struggle and learning how you have your powers. I've seen too many kids like you advised on reputations you didn't want. You are already proving that you're not confused. Now they are proving that it gives more than that." Dorian didn't answer immediately. "For a very long time I struggled with survival, and survival from that bed. But as the coach said, the way the coach saw him, it wasn't to prove anything. It was about being more." That night, Dorian sat in his bed, staring at his uncle's old boxing gloves. He was thinking when he was held back, whenever he left, and when he wasn't. The trainer was right. Blythe remains the same. People will think about what they wanted, but Dorian still had options. And maybe, just maybe, this time he'll do something else. It wasn't just about knowing when to fight. It was about knowing what to fight for. If this story is working with you, click this subscription button. A life full of decision-making, and sometimes the most difficult is who they want. Talk about it in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand on the floor? How did you deal with it? We continue the conversation.